Hi everyone, welcome to today's episode of Creative Thrive. Our guest today is not just an artist, she's a beacon of inspiration, a cultivator of creativity, and a guide to finding and unleashing the wonder that resides in all of us. She teaches her celebrated workshops worldwide and doesn't just teach art, she awakens the dormant creativity waiting to be unleashed in each and every student. Her artwork is a vibrant celebration of life itself, and it draws from her globe-trotting adventures and her simple, exquisite moments that punctuate all of our lives. It showcases a deep reverence for our connections to each other, to the natural world, and the divine mysteries that permeate our existence. Her art is a testament to the interconnectedness of our stories, the richness of our shared experiences, and the choices we face each and every day to create or to unravel. Embarking on the world of workshops and retreats at the age of 47, her journey is really a testament to the power of resilience and determination. It proves that there is always time to chase your dreams or to start anew. And it also illustrates that the path of creativity and discovery does not recognize the boundaries of age or time. Her belief in art's transformative power invites us all to explore our creative potential. Please join me in welcoming to Creative Thrive, Tracy Verdugo. Hi, Tracy. How are you?
Hey, Tabatha. I'm really good, thanks, and thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. I have been so excited to talk to you. First of all, Aussie.
Yeah.
I have to do that every time I see another
Right.
Australian. I don't get to do it very often.
Yeah.
And I've been following you for a while on social media and really love your artwork and what I saw you were posting, your message that you put out there. And as I started to dive deeper into what you do and I guess the philosophies, which we'll touch on today, was just so inspired about your story and the fact that you started your workshops and teaching people and kind of this creative exploration of sharing with other people. Later in life, and 47 isn't late or old by any means, but for many people, it isn't the time they would start a venture like you did.
Right. It seems to be like it's a searching time or a time of redefining yourself for a lot of women, depending on what your life situation has been. For me, it was 2 kids who were now teenagers, and it was like that looming empty nest and my whole identity as a mother. And just like, what am I going to do when this part ends? Like, who am I outside of this? And I had already had an art business in that I was teaching kids art classes after school in our tiny little village, in the shed, in the backyard for 12 years. And I must have had every kid in the community come through that class. And you look, in a way, I think that was a huge gift, because working with children and seeing their boundless capacity for imagination and creativity and tipping things on their head and tipping paints on the floor, it's like, but I learned a lot from them, and it was like, wow, we need to be able to get back to that somehow. We need to be able to get outside of the judgment, get outside of the what's the right way to do this, and just play again and explore and let go of the outcome, let go of is anybody going to like this, And,
I think that's what really strikes me with your work. And when I hear you speak in your videos or the things that you post, and I've seen it mentioned, and you said if you could coin a term for a new art movement inspired by your teachings, it might be curiosity and wonderism. And I also saw you put the words in an interview, I believe, or perhaps your website, loosen up-ism.
Yes.
Or endless possibilityism. And I loved it. It's so true.
Yeah, yeah. Well, the art world it's a little bit stuffy, or a lot stuffy, and it's very bound by traditions. And I have friends who are in the fine art world, close friends, and they enter all the competitions, and some of them are becoming finalists. And that's a whole different world to what I'm doing. It's a different path, different trajectory. Um, and I actually had an interesting thing happen a few years back. I went to a workshop with a very well-known Australian artist. And right at the beginning of the workshop, she premised the whole 2 days by saying that if you didn't have an idea in your head of what your painting was going to be when it was finished, if you couldn't see the finished project in your mind, then
Mm.
it wasn't really art. And I just went, what? What? And I'm like, oh, that's really interesting because that's just what I do and what I teach. And,
Wow.
and so later that night I got home and I had a glass of wine and I decided to get onto Facebook Messenger with her and continued the discussion. And it was actually quite lovely. It was a discussion which was great, And so by the end of the discussion, I think she realized that she had had a certain amount of schooling as well that had led her into a particular story, just like we all have stories. And, when I saw her the next day at the workshop, she said, what do I know? She said, thank you for having that conversation with me. Maybe I'm just kind of spurting out things that I learned in art school. And maybe I need to think more about what, the differences that we can approach art with.
Yeah, it's really interesting because I think one of the things that I have found with creativity, it doesn't
Yeah.
matter what your medium is and how you choose
Mhm.
to express it,
Yeah.
is we're often taught to do it in a structured way, so we lose the play and the curiosity of it,
Yeah.
or we're
Yeah.
told it has to be this way, it can't be that way, so then it
Right.
becomes restrictive and
Yes.
we feel kind of tied into something, and it may not
Right.
be how we choose to express ourselves or the
Right.
best medium for us or the best way to express ourselves.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think the beautiful thing about creativity is it is available to us in any form that we choose to take that
Mm-hmm.
path.
Yeah.
And especially what you're teaching people in creating art
Yeah.
um, should have all the limits taken off, especially when you're doing it to express yourself or
Right.
for self-realization and fun.
Sure. Sure. Well, I think that what's evolved, because when I first started teaching these workshops, I was on my own spiritual path for many, many years, but I didn't feel like I wanted to bring that into the workshops in the beginning. Like fear of judgment, fear of like, what are they going to think I'm woo
Mm-hmm.
woo, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So I just kept it quite like, here's what we're doing. This is what the paint does. It was still loose and free. But pretty soon I started noticing that what the students were bringing to the workshops was all their stuff, right?
Mm.
All their emotional stuff, all their inner stuff, everything that's happened to them. When I started doing week-long retreats, more would come out. And it would come out that someone had been repressed by their mother had been a fine artist, and their mother had said, yeah, you haven't got it, what you're doing is not art, or never lived up to her. And so all these stories kind of started coming out, and I realized, hey, I'm not actually teaching just art, I'm learning about the psychology of humanity and how people bring their stuff into the process, whether it's the comparison thing, whether it's the self-talk, criticism, all of that. If they take those feelings outside the art experience, they'll find that they're also experiencing those in other parts of their life. So it
Mm.
is therapeutic. It is, like, okay, let's work on it here on this painting and then see if that
Yeah.
flows through.
I mean, how we do one thing is how we do everything, right? It's
Yes,
how we're
exactly.
showing up. So if we're restrictive in how we express our creativity, it's
Mm-hmm.
going to follow through
Yeah.
in everything. I'm really curious. So you were teaching children,
Yeah.
which is amazing,
Yeah.
art.
Yeah.
How did that pivot start? What happened? Was there a
Yeah.
catalyst for
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
to go
Yeah.
from
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
to not only teaching
Yeah.
the workshops that you teach, you do these retreats all over the world.
Yeah. 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 So I guess, there were two catalysts that I can kind of pinpoint. And one was I had purchased a book by an American artist, Dori Cantor. I think she's in her late 70s now, maybe not practicing as much. But the book was called Art Escapes. And there were lots of fun activities in that book that I was doing with the kids in the kids' art class. And as I got reading, in one chapter, in one little paragraph, she just happened to mention how I did this exercise when I was with a group, taking this group on a tour through Italy, and we were wandering through the wine fields and we were sketching. And, I do that quite a lot. I have 3 or 4 groups, and I went, what? What? And at the time, I think that was 2008, the girls were still young. And I ran into Marco, my husband, and I said, look at this. I said, this is what some people get to do for a job.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, I want to do that one day. That's what I want to do. That would be perfect. And I felt the seed, boop, just, planted. Didn't happen right away, but it was there. And so then what happens, of course, is you start to notice other things that correspond and align with the seeds that are planted. And I began to see people online blog. It was the time of the great blog writing, and reading other artists' blogs, finding other artists who were traveling, and just going, wow, this is actually a reality for some people. They get to do this, during the year, and just so that kind of started to move in me. And so as I started to research different art retreats, I had no concept at that time that I was going to reach out and try and get into one. 2011, I was in a situation where our eldest daughter was leaving home to go to uni. She was 18. And then the youngest was wanting to go to California. My husband's from California. So she was wanting to go on an exchange over there. And I was just like, oh my God, I'm going to lose both my babies all at once. They're only 15 and 18. This is too soon. So I concocted this little thing in my mind that if I could find a retreat to teach at in California, then I could at least go and have a holiday and spend time with Sienna and hang out. That was it. That was the beginning. And so I started typing, sent off an email to a big art retreat, had no idea, knew nothing about it. Turns out the organizer, Sally Ann McClelland, was an Australian, and she was organizing these big retreats. We're everywhere.
We are everywhere.
Yeah, and she wrote back, and she just had a little giggle, and she said, look, Tracy, I really thank you so much for reaching out. I admire your, I can't remember what she called it, but, your enthusiasm or whatever. But she said, I don't know if you realize, but I book the teachers for these retreats a year in advance, and everything is fully booked up. It's all planned. I'm writing to her a month before, can I come over next month and teach a class? And she said, I like your spirit. And she said, so if you're coming over anyway, why don't you come and teach a night class? We'll add something in. So I sent her some ideas of what I might teach. And then she wrote back to me and she said, you know what, I think that one there would be better as a 3-day event. And I'm going to squeeze you into the curriculum. So I was like, okay, that's awesome.
That seed got fully watered and blossomed.
Right. And then bigger than that was as soon as I announced that, I had a group on Facebook at the time that was about 5,000 people. And we were just all people floundering our way through creativity, basically. And when I said to them, I'm coming to America and I'm coming to teach at this art retreat, we were so close within that community that at least 15 of them reached out to me and said, oh my God, if you're going to come all this way here, please come to Texas. I'll host you. Please come to Florida. Please come to North Carolina. And within about 2 days, I had a 12-week tour across America. First time solo travel at 47. And off I went with my 2 big suitcases.
Wow.
And did this tour. And that was the beginning.
I mean, there are so many things to unpack from that story. I think the first one is the bravery, right? Right. I think for many of us, regardless of age or the changes and the transitions that go through in our life, we become so comfortable.
Yes.
And we also, it takes some vulnerability to put yourself out there and have someone say no, right? And this woman sounded amazing and it was clearly meant to be, and she was gracious and turned it into something.
Sure.
But if you hadn't have put yourself out there, even if you had gotten a no, you wouldn't have now built this amazing business where you do this all the time.
Right, right. Yeah, exactly. Or maybe if she had said no, maybe I would have posted about that, and maybe the community would have said, "Well, come anyway, and we'll
Right.
host you here and here." But who knows? I mean, yeah, but definitely, yeah, bravery is a big thing, and it's like I know Liz Gilbert talks about this all the time, being terrified every single day, And I was so nervous this morning because I haven't done a podcast interview in a while. And I felt that old, like, oh God, I'm breathlessness and what if,
Mhm.
like, what if I get the questions wrong and, all of that type of thing, or I say something stupid. And that's why my first question is, are you going to edit this? We have this
But
great fear of like being humiliated, right? And yeah.
well, we do. And I think the thing that's interesting with that is because we all have that in some way. And
Mm-hmm.
it feels, again, vulnerable,
Yeah.
frightening to put ourselves out there sometimes. And I think
Yeah.
that fear inherently, in my experience,
Yeah.
is what holds us back and stops
Right.
us from pursuing our dreams and our
Yeah.
passions. And sometimes our
Yeah.
passions don't need to be business,
No.
um, monetary exchanges. They
Right.
can just be things that light us up that, we're
Right.
never going to do for a full-time job. But
Right.
it
Right.
it leads me into a question for you, because to hear
Mm-hmm.
that story and then hear the community that you had built
Mm-hmm.
and their loyalty is, how
Mm-hmm.
important is community to you as an
Mm.
artist and a teacher?
It's up there at number one. It really is, and I get a lot of beautiful artists, with gorgeous work contacting me asking for advice about
Hmm.
how to do what I've done. And sometimes they've got an online class ready to launch, but they've got maybe 100 followers. And I always say to them, work on the community first, because you can have this beautiful product and put it out and there'll be crickets because you just don't have, you don't have, you're just not visible yet, I guess, in a way. Like you haven't kind of connected with enough people who want some
Hmm.
of what you have. And so I think it's key. I really think it is. And I guess it can be tricky for people who find it hard to show up in that way. But I'm an introvert, and so, if I can do it, anybody can do it, as long as you like to connect with people.
How do you balance that, being an introvert and then coming out
Mm.
of your cocoon, right, as
Yeah, yeah,
introverts often go into, and
yeah,
teaching your workshops and
yeah,
also putting your art out there?
yeah, yeah. I think it's been an ongoing lesson in boundaries for me. It's been a huge thing. So when I first started doing that very first tour,
Hmm.
all of my hosts, Americans are so amazing and welcoming, and they all want to host you, and everybody wanted to have me at their home. And so I did a 12-week tour, staying in different, I knew them online, but they were strangers to me in reality, and spending time in all these different people's homes across 12 weeks. And it was exhausting because I
Sure.
was teaching all day, and then I was going home, and then it was expected to like have some kind of, you know, amazing experience with my host, and please come and play with me in my studio, or let's go out to dinner and meet all these other people. And honestly, I was just after that first one, I was like, I'm not doing that again. And it's not that I don't appreciate those gifts and those, generosity of spirit, but I need some time. And so now I balance out staying with a few very good friends who I've become friends with over the years, and then the rest of the time I'm in hotels or Airbnbs just to have that space.
Hmm.
So I'm great just being present all day long, and then I need to go home and just
Yeah,
turn
and
off.
well, and I think that is something that often all of us struggle with,
Mm-hmm.
is finding balance, and
Yeah,
especially when you're a business owner and you trying to
sure.
find that the balance and the boundary of,
Yeah,
pleasing clients and not pleasing clients and doing
sure.
those things, and
Yeah,
putting, especially as a creative, the lines
yeah,
often get a bit blurry.
yes,
And
yeah,
it's so incredibly important, right, to find that balance. And it sounds
yeah,
like
yeah.
you found those balancing points for you.
Pretty much. It's still. I guess you still have to deal with the fact that some people might feel like you're whatever, snobby to not accept their invitation or not understand your need for time out. But I think most people do understand.
Hmm.
Yeah, yeah. And especially if you kind of say it in the right way, you know, like I love doing this. I love teaching. But at the end of the day, I'm exhausted and I need a nap, or, or I just need to go to my room and, have a glass of wine and just relax and not talk to anybody until the next day. Yeah.
And I think
Yeah.
we all need to learn how to find that balance, and to be
Sure.
again, to be okay to verbalize that to people and ask for
Yes.
what we need as
Yeah.
well. I mean,
Yeah.
the thing, it sounds like with the community that you built before you even started the workshops, and obviously just grown and grown and grown from
Yeah.
there, and the community you have,
Mm.
is you're essentially asking people to be brave in a
Yes.
way,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because the people that are coming to your workshops, my understanding is they're not all artists, right?
Mhm.
They're
Mhm. Mhm.
exploring themselves, or
Yeah.
want
Yeah.
to dip their toe into creativity.
Yeah.
And that does take a bravery, and they don't want to
For
look
sure.
silly or be laughed at or screw
Yeah.
up, or
Yeah.
all the doubt that comes in. So
Yes.
it's
Yeah.
important that you walk that path as well.
Oh, for sure. And I understand, like, because I've been to workshops myself. I love putting myself in the position of being a student again.
Mhm.
And I notice sometimes the whole good student thing comes up in me, and it's like, I wanted the teacher to see me. I want the teacher to, like, say I'm doing something good, And so if they're coming around the room and somebody else gets a comment and I don't get all that kind of thing. So I'm like, oh, this is what everybody feels like. And so, now I actually talk about that at the beginning of a workshop. Like, some things might come up for you and you might feel like you're back in high school. But just know that when I'm walking around the room, if I don't mention you as I'm walking around the room, it's completely random. I have a little ADHD and I might have just spotted something over there and walked straight past you, and it's not intentional, So I try to kind of keep things light in that way so that they understand.
I saw a quote, again, that I read when I was doing research about you, and
Yeah.
you had in this quote, I remember thinking, I don't have any imagination. I
Mm,
can't think up ideas out of nowhere. The
I think that.
incessant comparing myself to others who
Right.
had some kind of gift I just couldn't find in
Right.
myself. You went
Yes.
on to
Right.
say, I decided to experiment with
Yeah.
paint and kept working at it.
Yep.
In 2004, I had a successful exhibition selling
Yep.
several thousands of dollars of art out of my
Yep.
home.
Yep.
People loved the Cutesy Bird series, but I knew there
Yeah.
was something more inside me,
Yeah.
something I wanted to articulate with my painting.
Right. Right. And I'm still trying to find it, and it's changing all the time.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
So
And so, yeah.
tell me the catalyst though, because I think, again,
Mm.
someone looks at, and the point of this podcast is for anyone listening,
Mm.
and I'm so grateful I have listeners from all different
Mm.
genres and all different careers.
Yeah.
If someone is listening and thinking, you know what, I always wanted to create, it may not be a painting, but it may
Right.
be, to hear you where you are now in
Yep.
your career and business say,
Mm-hmm.
I don't have any imagination, I
Mm-hmm.
can't think any ideas
Mm-hmm.
up, I don't
Mm-hmm.
have a gift.
Yeah.
And then to go from all the things that you have and now say, but I'm still looking, I'm still curious.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And I think that's the key. I always talk about being in the Lifelong Learners Club. And that's about curiosity and about, like, what else is there to learn. I feel like I've learned like a fingernail. That's how much I've learned worth of what else is out there. And I remember listening to a podcast a few years back with Krista Tippett, and I can't remember the name of the guy that she was interviewing, but he was a brilliant musician. He was in his 80s. He had been in symphonies all over the world. And he said to her, at 84, I feel like I'm just beginning to learn. And I was like, oh, I love that. That just feels amazing, like, just to be, how privileged to be on this journey of just learning something every day and just being open to the what ifs, what if I try this? What if I do that? What would happen if I do this? And I always talk about the what ifs in terms of coming at it from that curious state rather than from the anxious state, because you can also be stuck in the well, what if it all goes wrong? What if everybody hates it? What if this? What if that? So if we just kind of switch that self-talk and switch those words out to, but what if it, like you said, what if it all turns out, what if I learn something from this mistake that helps me go on? Because what happens is if we stop ourselves in the middle of the mistake and tear the piece up and throw it away, we've thrown away so many opportunities to actually learn some things that we can then bring in and grow in other areas. Like, what's the point of throwing it away if it's already done in your mind? Throw a little a tube of black ink at it and scrape it around a bit, and then drop some alcohol through there, which gives you a resist, and then see what it looks like. Something completely different. Maybe it'll spark something in you to head in a different direction, but at least you've tried something else,
I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. Tracy, I'm going to ask you before my next question because there's a little bit of static. It's not bad. We can take it out in editing, but we do close captions.
Yes.
So that's why you see me nod a lot, but I don't say anything to you. I don't want to jump on you because we step on each other. And in the closed captioning, it's really hard to keep it clean. So
Gotcha.
if we keep acknowledging each other to a minimum, it's okay if we do it facially, but not verbally.
But not, yeah, I know. Okay, good. I'll try.
So you talking about not throwing something out and throwing ink at it or putting alcohol on it and trying something new. I actually saw a 30-day challenge you did on YouTube. And the big takeaways from this video that I watched you present this challenge were trust, not attachment, to embrace the fear and the discomfort, to be brave and to keep pushing through and letting go.
Yep. All of the above. Yes.
So how does one do that when one is creating something and you're emotionally invested for whatever reason? It could just be because it feels good. And your challenge was to paint for 30 days consecutively, but keep painting over what you painted and changing it and morphing it and kind of doing a longer version of what we just talked about of not throwing it out, keep working it. How as a creative do you do that and not become so perhaps emotionally attached to your work to keep just reworking something?
Yeah. I'm trying to think, like the catalyst from that, because when I was first painting, maybe for the first 10 years, I didn't really understand acrylics. I hadn't been to any classes. I was just trying to figure it all out by myself. And I was doing very static kind of, non-layered works because I just was in the place of a lot of beginner artists. And then I attended a workshop with an artist named Flora Bowley, who is in Portland, Oregon. Well, she actually came out here and I hosted her for 3 days. And there were a lot of things that changed in that workshop. One, it was the first workshop I'd ever been to. So it was the first time I'd seen another artist practicing. And to me, that's become one of my hugest ways to learn, is to watch other artists doing what they do. Because it's almost like you can get inside their mind and imagine why they're doing that. And also learn from their mistakes. You can see when something goes wrong and then they go, oh, okay, well, this just went wrong, so I'll just try this, right? So you're like, oh, what? And that's what I'm hoping to bring with my videos as well. So that was a beginning for me. It was like, oh, well, there's a spray bottle that you can use with water and that does this, and then you could turn it around another way and look at it from that side. And so that opened up a lot of possibilities for me. And then I realized that I could kind of come up with my own workshop, and teach the same kind of thing, but of course, in a different way. Also, just by doing it, is that it's too simple an answer maybe, but I think we have this expectation with art, and I don't know why we do, that we can go to a 2-day workshop and then we can paint a masterpiece and put it on the wall at home. And if we don't get the masterpiece out of the 2 days, then we suck and we're not an artist and we're not going to try again. So I always say to my students, what if you went to a 2-day Spanish immersion? You'd never learned Spanish before. And at the end of the weekend, a Spanish person came up to you and started speaking to you and you were like, I don't know what they're saying.
Mm-hmm.
I suck at Spanish. I'm not going to do this anymore. So for some reason, I think it's that deep belief that art is a gift that only some people have, which has been conditioned. Yeah.
It is conditioned. And I think with whatever your art is, with creativity, that's why the words that you made up were delicious for me, of loosen upism.
Right.
And endless possibilityism, because it should be the fun, especially with what you're doing. And you're, if I look at your work and your paintings, you have a whimsy, and there is a brightness and a colorfulness and a fun to it.
Yeah.
And I think it's being able to share with people, not to take it so seriously, because then it's not fun.
No, exactly. And look, not to say that art is free and loose and playful all the time. There is usually some kind of messy middle, and the messy middle is when a lot of people give up. And so what I also try to teach is how to get through the messy middle, and how to realize that it's not the end. It's like you've got a favorite recipe that you've been making for years, and in the middle of the recipe, nothing is cooked properly. You haven't added in the final touches. You haven't tasted it to see whether it needs more salt and pepper. So if you judged that meal right in the middle, it would be the messy middle, and you're going to throw it down the sink? No, you're just going to keep pushing through. And the more you work with it, the more you perfect it, the more you make it your own. You might then add a little something that wasn't in the recipe because you know that that's probably going to work with those other spices. And, and so there are a lot of analogies that we can use to kind of help push through that bit where what you're feeling is you're feeling a failure. You're feeling like if anybody saw this right now, they would think that a 3-year-old had done it. And having said that, I think some 3-year-old art is the best art in the world. So,
Yeah, that was actually a question I had, especially because you have worked with children and taught children. And what are the major differences in creativity you have seen between children and how they approach creativity and adults and how they approach it?
Yeah, well, I have one story. When I was teaching kids art classes, I was also working in special ed at the local high school. So I work in the day, come home at 3, and then classes would start 3:30 and then 5 p.m. So I had 2 classes in the afternoons. So it's pretty hectic. I had 2 little kids as well. Sometimes I wasn't organized, a lot of the time. Luckily, I am very good at coming up with things on the spur of the moment. And so I'd come home this day, I was completely tired, and I'm like, what are we going to do today? And can we do something that doesn't make so much of a mess? So I looked around the kitchen and I just got out a cup and saucer, and I thought, I'll teach them about looking at things from all directions. And so we put the cup and saucer on the table. We did a little drawing of it, just looking at it, from our vantage point. And then I had them stand up on top of their chairs, and I put the cup and saucer on the ground. And then we did a drawing of what they look like on the ground. And then I got them get on the ground, lie on the ground, while I held the cup and saucer up above them, right? So here I was thinking it was just going to be a little exercise of drawing the cup and saucer. Now, when they finished, we had cup and saucer submarines going through the ocean. We had cup and saucer astronauts in the sky flying. We had cups and saucers doing all kinds of things and turning into all kinds of magical creatures. And that kind of thing is something we really lose, because I think as adults we're waiting for directions, and we want to do it right because we want the affirmation from whoever is teaching us. And very few of us still go outside of the box when we're being given instructions.
Yeah, I mean, I hear our imagination is sucked out of us.
Yeah.
Being an adult, being a grown up.
Yeah.
sucks our imagination out of us.
Yes.
Or
Yeah.
actually, most of the time, adults have sucked the imagination out of children. So as we grow
Right.
up, we're
Yes.
told, you know, not to fantasize anymore, or
Mhm.
don't daydream, or don't waste time
Yeah.
on that, or that's
Yeah.
silly or impossible, or
Yeah.
blah, blah,
Yeah.
blah. And
Yeah.
our imagination just starts to atrophy in some ways.
Mm-hmm. I remember my daughter when she was in year 10, she did art right through 10, 11, 12, and she was brilliant, but she did something that was completely off. It was her way that she construed the question and the direction. It was completely different than what anybody else did. And I said, that's amazing. That's fantastic. That's great. I wonder what, mark you're going to get for that. And she got marked down. She got failed because she did not follow the criteria of the question in the way that the teacher wanted her to follow it. And so that's, just an example of how we are kind of, oh, I better not do that again. Right? I better not, you know.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I think it's something, again, me being on this podcast and talking about creativity, I think it's
Mm,
something that we all crave in one way
mm,
or another, and is
yeah.
available to all of us, and very easy to lose sight of sometimes because it
Right.
morphs and changes. I mean, I saw, again, you said that you realized that you were teaching much more than art
Mm,
classes,
mm,
and the revelation that the way we approach our creative process
mm-hmm.
is a metaphor for how we approach everything in
Right.
life.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So once in Austin, Texas, I was teaching a group of women, and there was this beautiful woman there in her 60s. And she got down on the ground. Some had easels, some were at tables. She put her canvas on the ground right from the get-go, and she's sprawled out on the floor, and she's having the best time. And every time she did something that she liked, she would just exclaim to herself, "Good job! Oh, that's amazing! That's I'm so happy with that bit." And everybody would look around and everybody would smile and kind of light up. She lit up the room with her own self acknowledgement. And then I have people that are just so down on themselves, that are so just feeling like, I don't know, people that are asking me every second, is this the right way? Can I do it? I know you said this, but could I do it in this color? Or, and so it's just hesitancy. And so I think about those two different ends of the spectrum of self-love, self-expression, celebration of your own kind of mark making. And then the whole stilted, just not trusting any move that you make and needing the validation for it. And I want to be like the first woman.
Me too. She sounds
Right.
like fun. I want to
She
come
was
to any
great.
class with her. What inspires your creativity? What fuels your creativity?
I think life. I know it's a big kind of answer, but I'm life, humanity, nature, travel, especially um, newness, new experiences, freshness. So I think travel is a big part of that because we put yourself in you get jaded in your own little area,
Mhm.
and then you're in a new area. It might be somebody else's village, just like my village, but it has different buildings and a different culture and a different history, and the people have a different way of being, and that's really inspiring to me always. Poetry is inspiring, songs are inspiring. I think it's a little bit of everything that kind of gets put into my art.
Do you actively seek out the inspiration, or are you good at noticing that it's there?
I think I'm just noticing. Yeah, I think I'm forever like, um, if I'm on the beach walking along, I'll see a woman just sitting up in the distance, and just the way she's sitting and the pose, or she's looking at the ocean, or she's looking at her child play. And I take all these sneaky little photos as I'm walking, and for use in paintings later on. And so yeah, I'm always kind of trying to stay wide-eyed and open to like seeing what's around me. It's not always, you're not always in that space. There's some days
Mhm.
where you're like, I don't want to look at anything, but mostly I try to do that.
Well, how do you how do you overcome those challenging periods? I'm sure from, I mean, just life, but I'm sure
Mm.
even from starting your business and starting your workshops and doing all the things and
Yeah.
travel you do now,
Yeah.
there are definitely some challenges, roadblocks,
Hmm.
hiccups,
Hmm. Hmm.
life that happens.
Yeah.
How do you find that balance and overcome those challenges, but still keep that creativity alive and that optimism?
Mm. I think you just have to recognize that sometimes the challenges are going to be too big, and maybe sometimes you can't overcome them in that moment, and you just have to go with it and do the best for yourself. Like, I've had health things over the last 7 years. I had breast cancer in 2016. So I took the whole of 2017 off. I canceled all of the retreats. I found out I had breast cancer while I was on tour teaching. And I was going from ultrasound in this state to biopsy in this state to confirmation of cancer in this state, trying to hold it together and teach the retreats. And the day I got the phone call that I had breast cancer, I was with a beautiful group of women in Melbourne, Florida, and I had been with them before. It was, one of my favorite groups to go to. And I knew that they were a safe place for me to be and they were a safe place for me to share. So I was kind of going through my head as a professional, I shouldn't say anything about this. They've paid good money to come to this workshop. I don't want to be a downer. I don't want to spoil the weekend, blah, blah, blah. And we always have a circle, an opening circle where we share. And some women shared some pretty deep things that were going on in their lives. And I'm like, who am I to hold back what's happening with me? They've just been vulnerable enough. And so it came around and I told them what was happening and that I might get a phone call later that day. And when I did, there were tears and there was laughter and there was dancing and it was actually a beautiful weekend. And at the end of the weekend, they'd all been secretly painting little hearts that
Oh,
they here I don't know if you can see, but I have them up hanging up there. Can you see them hanging?
oh, wow.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and they wrapped those hearts around me. And yeah. So,
Oh,
and there were two women in the group that were long-time breast cancer survivors, and I took that, and then I came home, had surgery, had radiation, just got the rest of the year clear, and bought 5 million plants for our home. It was just, I just wanted life. I wanted life. I wanted growth. I wanted greenery around me. So that was that. And then I was diagnosed with a condition called ulcerative colitis, which is an autoimmune disease which attacks your colon. And that was gross because it's to do with,
mhm,
bathroom and stuff. And
mhm.
so there were lots of times, probably a year and a half, where I couldn't leave the house before 12 in the morning. And sometimes where I didn't go out at all for a couple of months where it was really, really bad. So in those times, sometimes I would just cozy up by the fire and bring all my paints inside on the table and put newspapers out everywhere and just paint for me, for the pure, I don't know, the joy or the comfort, I guess, the comfort of just being creative and in that space with the fire, and it was cold outside and I didn't feel good. So, um, yeah, that's kind of how I
Yeah.
dealt with it. And yeah.
I'm sorry you went through that, and uh, also it strikes me that when we have again
Mm,
an outlet, a creative outlet, or a
mm,
passion that is seeded in us, whatever that passion is. For some people it is painting, for some people it might be writing, for some it might be knitting or crochet or cooking or
mhm,
gardening, whatever it is, that
mhm,
again, that creativity, that we can look to our creativity and our passion when
mhm.
we have challenges in our life. It
Right.
can be cathartic, which it sounds like it was for you, and also supportive.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And I think at that time too, that was when I really started becoming interested more in the whole imagining, like honing my imagination and getting
Mm,
over whatever that blockage was in me. And so I started following more illustrators online and more, yeah, people that were working in different ways than me and experimenting with my sketchbook and trying out new things. And so, yeah, it was kind of like a hibernation in some ways, but out of it, there's been a lot of little butterflies kind of flying around. Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
I love that. I love that visual. A lot of butterflies. I'm a visual, so
Yeah.
flying around.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
a lot of your work is created intuitively, right? I've heard you say.
Mm.
And I've also, again, heard you say that it's often surprising to
Mm.
you what the outcome is because you're approaching it in such an intuitive way.
Yeah.
What do you think the role of intuition in your creative process is? And do you have any advice for people to tap into that?
Hmm. Yeah, I feel like, because I know there are artists out there who are pure intuitive painters, and they do things very differently than the way I do. So I've been trying to figure out what it is that I do. It's almost like considered intuition, or intuition with a little bit of structure, to keep you from feeling like you're floundering, you know. And so I do have some little rules that I apply, and they're very intangible. I guess they're like, I have like a word list. I have a free class on my website, and there's a word list I use. So I write down words like bold, um, thick, opaque, and then I write down the opposite of those words. So bold, delicate, thick,
Hmm.
thin, curvy, straight, blah, blah, blah. And I have that list near me. I actually have it in my head now. I don't have to have it physically anymore, but I give that to my students. So when you're feeling like you don't know where to go, or your intuition is just like, I have no idea what to do next,
Crap.
right?
Yeah.
Then you look at the list and you say to yourself, what have I got a bit too much of on here? Is it all bold lines and bold marks and bold shapes? Maybe I need to just add something delicate, a few little dots here, a little leaf, design just floating down out of the top. Is the energy of the piece too frenzied? How could I add a little bit of calm in there? Maybe if I just drop some ink and just sprayed it a little bit, that would calm that really frenzied bit that's there. So there are certain kind of, I guess, structural ideas that I do
Mhm.
have and teach to help us when we are floundering with the intuition. So I guess it's going back and forth between the two.
It sounds like trust, though. You know, again,
Yeah,
I believe with any creative process that you have to trust yourself.
right.
I also
Yes.
believe you have to know when to stop.
Yes.
You have to know when to
Yes.
walk away. And
Yes.
sometimes I know for my uh, profession that it is sometimes knowing when to walk away and to then come back and look,
Mhm.
or knowing just when to walk away, right? It's
Yeah.
time to put all the
Yeah.
products down, the scissors down, and put everything down.
Yeah.
And I'm sure with artwork, it is the
Same.
same. But
Mhm.
when you're talking about intuition, I like it because I think with us being taught as we come into adulthood to lessen our imagination
Mhm. Mhm.
and our curiosity sometimes as well, we get taught to dampen down
Yeah.
and turn down our intuition. And I
Yeah.
think we're collectively getting better with
Yes.
stepping into it and turning it up and listening to the volume or learning how to raise the volume up. But
Yes.
it's so important, especially when you're following something that makes you feel good, that
Mhm.
you're creating, to listen to that little voice inside.
Mm. Mhm. And then the other thing too that came up when you were just talking then is that, um, so I have an exercise that I do where we've just filled the canvas with color and marks and just gone crazy with it. There's stuff everywhere. And then we have a group session where we bring out a piece of chalk for everybody. So you can draw on a canvas with chalk and then rub it off, right?
Mhm.
And I tell them to put their magic eyes on. You know, when they used to have those magic books where you would, like, your eyes would do a certain thing and then you would see
Mhm.
something in it. So we try to see things in the canvas. And for some people, it comes really easily. Some people are like, oh God, I see a chicken flying through the air, and oh my gosh, there's a fish down there, and there's a this and there's a that. And then I noticed that for other people in the room, the very fact that that woman can see all of those things makes them feel badly about themselves, because I don't see a thing. and I'm not good at this. And then the more they say that, it firms it, and then they can't get their magic eyes on, right? Because we've all got the magic eyes, but if you're saying to yourself, I'm no good at it and I can't do this, it's a frustration thing, and then it blocks that. But we try and do that as a group exercise, and I tell them everybody can actually do this, and the more you do it, the better you get. And we have some fun with it, and I draw funny things all over their canvases that they can rub off, or they can go with it if they want to. But yeah, it's just really interesting to see how the words that people say to themselves can actually block that imagination. And I tell them it's okay if it's not natural for you. Go home and practice more. Just go home and I think that by watching other people in the room actually bring some things out of their canvas, that's also helpful, because they see lots of different things emerging. They see lots of different ways that people are interpreting, and that can be inspiring, or it depends. If you see it as inspiring, then it's beneficial to you. If you see it as they're better than I am and I'm no good at it, then of course it's not going to be beneficial. So we talk about all that as well.
Yeah. But I also think that it gives people permission, right? When you create communities and environments where everyone is exploring, and some people are more experienced explorers than others, it gives you permission, if you're not quite there yet, or you're developing your magic eye or intuition or whatever those things are. It lets you look at someone else doing it and go, oh, it's safe for me to do that. It's okay. I just need a little bit more work. I just need
and not only that, but it's possible as well. It's like, oh, I see that. Somebody else has done it. It's a possible thing. It can be done.
Yeah, 100%. I would love to know this as we get ready to wrap up. Tell me about teaching art to Elizabeth Gilbert in Fiji, of all places. That's amazing.
Right before the whole world shut down. Like, we just squeezed that in. We totally squeezed it in.
Was it a private lesson?
No. So what it was, I think back in 2014, Liz was writing Big Magic, and she was very visible on her Facebook page at the time. And I was on there, and thousands of women were on there chatting and talking to each other. And I noticed that a lot of what she was saying was what I had written, certain similar things to what I had written in my book, Paint Mojo, which came out in 2014. And so, I would have a little conversation here and there, and Liz hardly ever interacted with anybody. It was just we were all talking to each other. And then one day she said something, and I went, you know what, that's so cool. That reminds me of this little inspirational photo I had made, one of my paintings with a Dr. Seuss quote on it. And so I just posted that on her page. And if anybody needs this today, type of thing. And then Liz reposted it. And so, as you know, if somebody well-known reposts something, reshares it, then the next minute you get 10,000, 20,000 shares, and my inbox is filled with, oh my God, Liz Gilbert shared your thing. Anyway, so over the next several months, we developed a little online relationship where I was posting things and she was sharing them. And then she began to call me the patron artist of her page. And it was really cute, and it was lovely. And then I sent her a package to say thank you, because she had brought a lot of people into my community. So I found her address, little sleuthing, and sent her a package. And then she came to Australia. I met her backstage at her reading in Sydney. She's beautiful. She's so down to earth and normal. And then what happened? Just a little bit more interaction over email. And then coming up to 2020, I saw this thing on Instagram, actually. It was called the Ultimate Girls Week Away in Fiji. And I was like, whoa, I want to go teach there. And Liz was going to be there. So I did the same thing I did right back in the beginning. I wrote a little letter to the organizer, and I said, can I come and teach at your event? And she said, no. She said, you wouldn't believe how many inquiries I've had since we just posted about it. It's all said and done. We have our instructors. Everybody's there, blah, blah, blah. So I snuck a message to Liz on Instagram, and I said, Oh my God, I just saw Fiji. That would be an absolute dream to be there with you. And I know that you've said that you'd love to do one of my classes before, so, but they say it's awful. They say there's no chance. Anyway, I was in Bali doing a retreat. I got a call from the organizer, and I had had a dream the night before that I was going to get this call. And
Wow.
she called me and she said, I think you might know why I'm calling. And I said, did Liz contact you? And she
Wow.
said, yes. She said, Liz contacted me and she wants you to come and be one of the teachers in the. So she said, what am I going to say? She's the keynote speaker. So I guess you're coming to Fiji. Here's here's your
Well,
pay. This is what happens.
yay to Liz Gilbert for having
Yeah.
some clout. So yay.
I
And
know.
yay to you for,
Yeah.
and anyone listening, that definitely shows nothing ventured, nothing gained. I mean, if you
Absolutely. Look.
put yourself out there and
Yeah.
you had
Yeah.
obviously built, some kind of relationship,
Rapport. Yeah.
rapport
Yeah. Yeah.
with her, but
Yeah.
also you allowed yourself to be vulnerable enough to just put it out there and see what happened, and
And
look what
also,
ended up happening.
yeah, and also I would have been totally okay if it didn't happen. I
Right.
think you have to be in that place too. It's like plant enough seeds, put enough things out there, and whatever's meant to be is going to be. And if it doesn't happen, then it wasn't meant to be, right? And so we got there. It was a week on an island with 100 women. Liz did a whole one-day workshop, and then you could choose to go to lots of people's little 45-minute workshops, and we had to do 2 of them. And so Liz signed up for both of my 45-minute
Oh, nice.
workshops
See?
with her niece.
Not shabby, not shabby, teaching art around the world, but
It was so
especially
cool.
on a
So
Fiji
good.
island.
So
And
good.
here is one of my last questions for you.
Yeah.
Nature or nurture? Do you think
Mm.
creativity is nature or nurture?
Nature and nurture is one of my biggest ponderings in life. I make words up all the time. As far as art is concerned, I think maybe you need to have a little bit of genetic something in there, maybe but everything is creativity, right? As you were saying before I started making art, I was really into cooking, gardening. I would dabble in dried flower arrangements and have a business doing that. I didn't realize until I went to Mexico and Guatemala that there are some people in the world to whom art is it's not even a separate thing. It's an everyday part of their lives. Their plates are hand painted. Their clothes have embroidery on them. It's like we're the ones who've lost that. We're the ones who've actually separated art from life. And I'd love that to change completely. So I think maybe intrinsically the whole of humanity is creative by birth, is inherently creative, whether or not that manifests in anything, because maybe some people just don't have the time because they're working their whole lives and they never get the chance to. But I think it is inherent. And then I think as long as you have the desire and the intention to follow through and do the work and practice, then everybody can become some kind of creative in the path that they choose. Yeah.
Nice. Well, you're definitely contributing to people unleashing their creativity in different ways, which I think is incredibly empowering for people, especially if they are in a little bit of a threshold or if they're feeling a little bit stuck. Sometimes that extra lubrication of those creative wheels and getting out of your comfort zone and trying something new can really bring back that creative spirit. So I love that you're teaching people to do that, and you get to travel all around the world while doing it. It is not too shabby. Tracy, it was lovely. Thank you so much for coming on Creative Thrive and for sharing your journey and creativity and inspiration with all of us.
Thank you, Tabatha. Had a blast talking to you. It's been really fun.
Thanks. Reflecting on our conversation with Tracy Verdugo on Creative Thrive, I'm so inspired by her bravery and her openness to trying new things. Tracy reminds us of the importance of boundaries in preserving our creative spaces and our personal energy, which I think is such a great reminder for all of us in any kind of work, especially when we're in a creative process. I love that she introduced the messy middle to us, that often challenging part of any creative process where we might want to give up or abandon it because it may not be going in the way we think it should. Tracy's advice was to push through because perseverance leads to achievement, and I couldn't agree more. Tracy's emphasis on the importance of self-validation and staying open to inspiration is also a really powerful reminder. There is inspiration all around us. We just need to take the moment to tune in, to notice it, and to let it actually fuel our creative endeavors. I think Tracy's sense of community, human connection, and her willingness to put herself out there and chase after her dreams offers a really vibrant model for all of us to live not just creatively, but authentically, and to also remember to never give up on your dream. So thank you, Tracy, for your really refreshing insights and for showing us the power of community and your personal courage and inspiration in the creative journey. And if you would like more information on creativity and personal growth, then I'd love it if you would join me at Thrive Hive, where we explore these themes deeper with live monthly classes and a whole library of other information. You can learn more at thrivehive.co. And please support Creative Thrive by following, liking, and subscribing to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast platform, because your engagement helps me to continue to have these incredible conversations with these amazing creative souls. So until next time, keep embracing the lessons that you learned today, protect your space, continue through challenges, recognize your worth, and stay open to the wonders around you. And you're one of them. See you next time on Creative Thrive.